Every couple of months, a new headline hits the news. Google, Meta, using teams offshore secretly to run parts of their operation. Headlines are meant to evoke feelings of scandal, outrage, and betrayal. But the reality is, all companies, big, small, across different industries, we have pretty much the same set of levers to pull for growth and operational efficiencies. And one of them just happens to be outsourcing, building offshore teams to help operate critical components of our businesses. So what are we really exposing here? In this video, I'm going to touch on 3 examples of companies that you know that are using outsourcing and building overseas teams in a way that you might not be aware of. And my hope is that we can learn from these examples and apply them to our own businesses. Let's dive in. Earlier this year in 2026, Waymo found itself in Washington, D.C. being scrutinized by Congress for its 70 remote assistance agents. Half of those agents resided in the Philippines. Waymo is the autonomous driving company. It has 3,000 robo-taxis. As a consumer, you call a Waymo, it picks you up from point A, you get in, there's nobody else in the car, there's no one driving the car except the AI, the tech, and it takes you to point B, and you get out. It's truly a seamless, magical experience. The large majority of rides happen this way, but on occasion, on the edge cases, there are situations where the remote assistance agents are called upon. These are situations where maybe there's a major construction zone that is kind of sticky to navigate as a car, or a traffic light is out. The taxi calls upon remote assistance agents to observe, give it some information, give it some feedback so that the vehicle can continue operating in a safe way, find itself out of that situation and continuing to the final destination. This is one of the best examples of human in the loop, the term we're hearing a lot in this AI boom. The AI is doing all the driving, all the work, and then once in a while, in these special circumstances, a human gets called in to make sure that the AI, the tools, technology are working. So why was Waymo in DC being scrutinized? Well, Congress had issues with national security. They had questions about the operation and worries about the remote assistant agents in the Philippines. So I don't know a lot about government affairs and national security, but I do know that Waymo is one of our leading technology companies. They're truly on the bleeding edge. They are building great technology, developing great technology, creating magical experience for us consumers here in the US. And they are doing so by pulling on one of the common levers that companies like Waymo has, which is outsourcing, building critical teams overseas to run parts of their operation. A few years ago, Amazon launched something called Just Walk Out. It was a simple but also mind-blowing idea. You could walk into a grocery store, pick out what you wanted, and just walk out, like the name implies. Amazon was trying to create a frictionless experience using AI, but what was really going on behind the scenes? What we learned is that there are about 1,000 overseas agents in India powering the Just Walk Out technology. They were annotating video to train the AI and verifying transactions. I saw in the news somewhere that about 70 of 100 transactions required human intervention, so more than you'd expect, more than we expected. And consumers were frustrated at times. They had to wait hours to get their final receipt because, as we learned, it was a human in the background manually verifying transactions and checking people out. So people felt misled and a sense of betrayal, especially with the news headlines. And I totally get that. It wasn't the experience that we thought we were getting per se, but as an outsourcing insider behind the scenes of a lot of operations and teams like this, what I see is something a little bit different. Amazon, a generational company, one of the most innovative technology companies that we've ever seen, was experimenting. They wanted to stand up an MVP, a minimum viable product, as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And they saw the best path towards that was by putting together, building this overseas team in India. Oftentimes in tech, what we've seen is that companies stand up these teams to try to find product market fit, to try to create the experience that customers actually want, and then they quickly build the technology behind it. In this instance, Amazon realized that there wasn't product market fit, and they quickly pivoted. They ultimately pivoted to grocery carts that scan the items. So I see this as just another example of a leading technology company using overseas teams to push the technology further, to push the customer experience further. So in this instance, what I see is a playbook for experimentation, quickly building MVPs, testing, getting customer feedback, and pivoting if need be. Let's talk about Carl's Jr. and a company called Presto Automation. Presto sells AI voice ordering to fast food chains. The idea: implement Presto's technology, reduce the need for a physical person in your restaurant managing the drive-through, reduce times, increase throughput, all through their technology. Carl's Jr., Hardee's, Checkers, they all signed on. And what we learned is that in the background, there was a team in the Philippines that would help the AI when it got stuck to process the orders and help the customers move along through the drive-thru. The Philippines team helped out with 70% of drive-thru transactions. And that is a little bit different than what Presto Automation was promising. It promised that 95% of drive-thru transactions would be handled with their AI technology. But here's the thing, the team in the Philippines was executing. Drive-thru lines were moving faster, revenue was up, and the restaurants needed one less person in their stores managing the drive-thru lines. The only thing was that there was a mismatch between the 70% of transactions that required someone in the Philippines to intervene and the 95% number that Presto Automation was promising. So why are we talking about Carl's Jr. and Presto Automation? One of the reasons is because this was actually the beginning of Presto's demise. Investors lost confidence in Presto, and unfortunately, what this meant was that the team in the Philippines was villainized, and I think very unfairly, because they were actually doing a great job driving all the results that we previously mentioned. And so from an outsourcing insider perspective, what I think went wrong here was the claims of how the work was getting done and a lack of emphasis on the actual outcomes. Was the Philippines team the reason for Presto's decline? No, the team was actually driving results. We just touched on 3 case studies: Waymo, Amazon, and Carl's Jr. Presto Automation. Here are my takeaways. 1, some of the biggest brands that we know and love leverage outsourcing and overseas teams to grow their companies. 2, a trend that we're seeing today, the combination of AI and overseas teams to be very, very powerful to scale companies. And 3, a personal take of mine and maybe just a word of caution. I think oftentimes overseas teams and outsourcing unfairly used as a scapegoat. If you've watched to this point, thank you so much. And if you have just a second more, I'd greatly appreciate it if you liked and subscribed to this channel to follow along on what we're doing at Hireframe. And if you have any questions or want to know more about how other companies like these leverage outsourced teams, please reach out.